Ukrainians is hard to explain other than as a political pursuit. There's no question in my mind that were their names not Biden, the president would never have done what he did. The defense argues that the Senate should leave the impeachment decision to the voters. While that logic is appealing to our democratic instincts, it is inconsistent with the Constitution's requirement that the Senate, not the voters, try the president. Hamilton explained that the founders' decision to invest senators with this obligation rather than leave it to the voters was intended to minimize, to the extent possible, the partisan sentiments of the public at large. So the verdict is ours to render under our Constitution. The people will judge us for how well and faithfully we fulfill our duty. The grave question the Constitution tasks senators to answer is whether the president committed an act so extreme and egregious that it rises to the level of a high crime and misdemeanor. Yes, he did. The president asked a foreign government to investigate his political rival. The president withheld vital military funds from that government to press it to do so. The president delayed funds for an American ally at war with Russian invaders. The president's purpose was personal and political. Accordingly, the president is guilty of an appalling abuse of public trust. What he did was not perfect. No, it was a flagrant assault on our electoral rights, our national security, and our fundamental values. Corrupting an election to keep oneself in office is perhaps the most abusive and destructive violation of one's oath of office that I can imagine. In the last several weeks, I've received numerous calls and texts. Many demanded in their words that I stand with the team. I can assure you that that thought has been very much on my mind. You see, I support a great deal of what the president has done. I voted with him 80% of the time. But my promise before God to apply impartial justice required that I put my personal feelings and political biases aside. Were I to ignore the evidence that has been presented and disregard what I believe my oath and the Constitution demands of me for the sake of a partisan end, it would, I fear, expose my character to history's rebuke and the censure of my own conscience. I'm aware that there are people in my party and in my state who will strenuously disapprove of my decision, and in some quarters I will be vehemently denounced. I'm sure to hear abuse from the president and his supporters. Does anyone seriously believe that I would consent to these consequences other than from an inescapable conviction that my oath before God demanded it of me? I sought to hear testimony from John Bolton, not only because I believed he could add context to the charges, but also because I hoped that what he might say could raise reasonable doubt and thus remove from me the awful obligation to vote for impeachment. Like each member of this deliberative body, I love our country. I believe that our Constitution was inspired by Providence. I'm convinced that freedom itself is dependent on the strength and vitality of our national character. As it is with each senator, my vote is an act of conviction. We've come to different conclusions, fellow senators, but I trust we have all followed the dictates of our conscience. I acknowledge that my verdict will not remove the president from office. The results of this Senate court will in fact be appealed to a higher court, the judgment of the American people. Voters will make the final decision, just as the president's lawyers have implored. My vote will likely be in the minority in the Senate. But irrespective of these things, with my vote, I will tell my children and their children that I did my duty to the best of my ability, believing that my country expected it of me. I will only be one name among many, no more, no less, to future generations of Americans who look at the record of this trial. They will note merely that I was among the senators who determined that what the president did was wrong, grievously wrong. We are all footnotes at best in the annals of history, but in the most powerful nation on earth, the nation conceived in liberty and justice, that distinction is enough for any citizen. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
And there you have it. Republican Senator Mitt Romney, one of two senators for the state of Utah, on the Senate floor there, announcing that he will vote to convict Donald Trump. Romney, as far as we know so far, the sole Republican dissenting, breaking away from his party, saying that Trump is guilty of an act of appalling abuse of power, saying that he's aware that this will not lead to the president's removal. You need a two-thirds majority in the Senate for that to happen, but that he's doing what he believes to be right, and said that what the president did with regards to withholding that military aid to a U.S. ally, Ukraine, was, quote, grievously wrong. And just a little programming note for you, we will rejoin our colleagues at CNN USA in just about 20 minutes, and the vote on whether to acquit or convict the President of the United States happens at 4 p.m. Eastern. That's about an hour and 20 minutes from now. There was also a question surrounding Doug Jones, who's a Democrat, but who's a Democrat from the state of Alabama, whether or not he would break away from the Democrats, from his Democratic colleagues, and vote to acquit. He has announced that he will vote to convict as well. Again, not enough to remove the president from office, but here a symbolic act by the senator from Utah, Mitt Romney. All right, we'll have a lot more at the top of the hour on that. I want to get you caught up on our breaking news from Istanbul. Where all 179 people on board reportedly made it out alive, which is, by the way, a miracle if you see the state of the passenger jet, which skidded off the runway and broke apart into 3 pieces. Here's what's left of the Pegasus airline flight, just 3 large chunks. Let's take another look at that landing, and you can see flames on the plane, from the plane. 120 people were injured. But as I mentioned, though it's hard to believe, everyone on board that plane reportedly survived. Investigators are now looking into what went wrong. This is the second time in as many months that a plane has skidded at Istanbul's Sabiha Gökçen Airport. CNN's Arwa Damon tells us now that there are some serious concerns.
The questions that many are going to be asking is, how safe is it to land at Sabiha Gökçen? Remember, Istanbul is trying to position itself as an aviation hub, as a travel hub, given where it's located on the globe. And this is going to be very understandably concerning for many passengers. This particular flight was doing a fairly regular run. Multiple flights a day take place between Izmir and Istanbul. That was the route that it was on.
All right, well, some safety questions there, of course. Aviation analyst Peter Goals used to be managing director of the agency that investigates plane crashes in the United States, and he joins us now from Washington. Peter, you had an opportunity, I'm sure, to see that video of that terrible landing of the Pegasus Airlines flight. You see flames coming out of the plane, and then eventually it ended up breaking into 3 pieces. What are your thoughts, your initial thoughts here?
Well, I think there's 2 things, Hala, we need to look at. One is, it appears as though the pilot landed too hot and too far down the runway, and he didn't. He just ran out of runway as he was trying to brake the aircraft, and that occurs sometimes when you've got tailwinds that are gusting. It's a little tricky sometimes to land a plane when you've got tailwinds pushing you faster than you want to go. But I think the real point, though, Hala, is that everyone got out safely, and they got out safely because of the design of the seats. These are 16G seats, as they call them. These are designed to stay in place and protect the passengers, even in difficult and terrible landings such as this. So this is a real testament to the robustness of the aircraft.
And I believe we do have images and even still images of the seats as they're seen, because you have the plane. It's just remarkable. The entire nose of the plane came off, and you can see a row of seats, and you think to yourself, how did anyone survive that? Our reporter Jomana Karache in Istanbul was saying that this is still, by the way, an ongoing rescue operation, that there are people still on board the plane. What does that tell you?
Well, it simply says, these planes, if you're in an aircraft that's going to have a difficult landing, and then you buckle your seatbelt extremely tightly and assume the brace position, you may survive, and you're likely to survive, and you're likely to be able to walk away from that accident. And I think it's a real testament to the design of the aircraft, the safety of the seats, and of course the rescue folks from the airport that got there quickly to put out the fire.
And everyone is absolutely glad that this fire did not cause an explosion. But there were questions about why that didn't happen. Is it because this was a plane coming in on landing and it had used up most of the fuel that it had to fly on board, to fly from Izmir to Istanbul? Is that possibly one of the reasons?
Well, it probably had less fuel on board, but also what it means is that the fuel tanks, which are located primarily in the wings of the aircraft and then directly under the center of the aircraft, were probably not breached. And that the fire came from collapsed landing gear and the hydraulic fluid and oils that run that sort of thing. But still, if you're in a tough landing, if you keep yourself buckled, you may get out. In fact, you're likely to get out.
What would it have been like for people on board? I mean, I can imagine how terrifying it is, but I do wonder. I mean, do you realize at every stage of the landing that something is going dreadfully wrong? What is it like then inside of the aircraft? Yeah.
Yeah, my guess on this, Hala, is that the passengers were expecting a perfectly normal landing, probably a little rough because of the storms in the area, and that the pilot, came in fast, that a gust of wind or a prolonged gust of wind carried the aircraft too far down the runway, and that he made the decision to try and land instead of doing a go-around. My guess is the passengers didn't really understand that they were in a tough situation until they went off the end of the runway.
Peter Goals, thanks so much. Really appreciate your perspective.
In other words, they didn't have time to figure out what was going on until after it went on.
Elsewhere in Turkey, rescue workers are searching for bodies of dozens of people feared buried alive by two separate avalanches. At least 38 people are dead, many of them the rescuers themselves. The first avalanche happened Tuesday night. That one killed 5 people. As teams were trying to get to victims, another avalanche descended around midday Wednesday, killing 33 more.
Wow.
Another 53 people were hurt. Weather conditions there are hampering further rescue efforts.
Wow.
Still to come tonight, how the Wuhan virus is impacting the global economy. Some huge brands are shutting down their Chinese operations completely. We'll be right back.
Shutting down their operations completely. For surely to God not. Do they not realize how devastating that will be to all their vendors that they do business with? People all over the world? For surely to God they ain't shutting down all their stuff over there. Has it gotten that bad? Jesus. Lord God, what's going on over there in that country? Whoa. Wow. We really are living in the last days. The true last days. The last days of all the last days.
Do you
Lord, Lord, Lord. Hold it.
Air quality City Update in association with Copernicus, Europe's Eyes on Earth.
I want to return now to the other major international story we're following, the global fight against coronavirus. While the lives lost and people sick are the major headline in the virus story, it's also having a significant impact on the lives of ordinary people because it's having a significant impact on the global economy. The parent company behind luxury brands like Versace and Jimmy Choo says it's closed about 2/3 of its stores in China, and obviously employees who work in those stores are affected. The ones that remain open are barely doing any business at all. It expects to lose more than $100 million of Chinese business this quarter. Disney says its parks in Shanghai and Hong Kong could remain closed for at least 2 months. Imagine all the employees there and the families they support. The shutdowns that could cost the company $175 million will also impact ordinary people in that part of the world. And Hong Kong airline Cathay Pacific is asking its 27,000 employees to take 3 weeks of unpaid leave in coming months. Cathay has canceled 90% of its flights to mainland China. Let's get more on how this is all
90%.
impacting the global economy. Our business correspondent Claire Sebastian is there. So talk to us with us.
What did she just say?
And Hong Kong airline Cathay Pacific is asking its 27,000 employees to take 3 weeks of unpaid leave in coming months. Cathay has canceled 90% of its flights to mainland China. Let's get more on how this is all impacting.
Do you believe that? A major airline. 90%. In other words, they've almost come to a complete total standstill.
The global economy. Our business correspondent Claire Sebastian is there. So talk to us with us in New York. Talk to us about these brands, because China is really a big driving force in terms of these luxury brands' profits, their revenue. There's this new emerging middle class there. There's Chinese people with money now to spend on these big luxury brands. And if that side of the business is suffering, it's really going to hurt them a lot.
Yeah, many of these businesses have actually been expanding in China only now to see this stoppage. Capri Holdings, which, as you say, is the owner of Versace, Jimmy Choo, Michael Kors, all very popular brands in China. They say that 150 of their 225 stores in the country are still closed. And as you mentioned, seeing much reduced traffic at the other ones. Those 225, by the way, that's about 17% of their global store base. So this is not an insignificant part of their business. And they are saying that revenue for the full year and for this quarter will be lower. Store closures, however, also affecting brands like Nike, like Adidas, also heavily dependent on China. And there's a sort of double whammy for some of these companies. Nike, for example, produces about a quarter of what they sell in China. So we are seeing supply chain impacts as well. That's impacting companies like Airbus, which has a final assembly plant in Tianjin, which is also closed. Hyundai, the South Korean car maker, is seeing suspending some of its production lines because of disruption to supply of parts from China. So this is rippling through a whole variety of different businesses and big multinational companies having to make difficult announcements to the market.
Lord.
And Claire, Cathay Pacific asking its employees to take unpaid leave. How's that going to work?
Yeah, that's sort of the first of its kind of announcement that we've had where personnel are being directly impacted. However, they are being asked, all of the 27,000 employees of Cathay Pacific are being asked to take 3 weeks of unpaid leave between March and June of this year. So they won't all be taking it at the same time. Cathay says it has to try to preserve cash as this crisis unfolds. The last time they did this was in 2009 after the global financial crisis. They also did it during the SARS outbreak in 2003. And don't forget, Cathay is already struggling. It has already decided to cut capacity this year after they were impacted to quite some degree by the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong last year. So a very difficult time for that company.
Wow.
All right, difficult for the employees. I guess the only very small silver lining is they're not layoffs. This is unpaid leave, so hopefully they'll be able to get back to work and make a living very soon. Thanks very much, Claire Sebastian. Still ahead, a first lady accused of murder. We have the story that captivated Lesotho. We'll be right back.
South Africa.
First Lady accused of murder. Imagine that. Is that strange or what? It's awful. Good God. A major airline industry over there. 90% of its flights shut down. Not diverted, shut down. That is wow.
We know our outstanding experience is energizing.
Tell me that that virus ain't serious. When you start seeing stuff like this happening, something's going on, buddy. You can bet your top dollar on it. Something's going on that ain't right whenever you start seeing stuff like this occurring.
And inspire.
Story. A first lady in Africa is accused of murder, and not just murdering anyone, but the first wife of her husband, the prime minister. The killing happened more than 2 years ago, but the first lady of Lesotho has just been arrested and charged. This is a shocking turn of events and a gripping story for the region. David McKenzie is following it from nearby South Africa. What do we know about these charges?
Well, they are extremely serious charges. Murder and attempted murder, Hala, of the First Lady of Lesotho, the tiny mountain kingdom, which is surrounded entirely by South Africa. And it's in South Africa where that First Lady appears to have been hiding for several weeks after the initial arrest warrant was put forward by the police in Lesotho. You saw those extraordinary scenes in a courthouse in Maseru, in the capital of the First Lady. Now, she's accused of and now charged with the killing of the former First Lady, as you said, just days before the inauguration.
Wow.
Of her husband, the Prime Minister, for his second term. She then formally married the Prime Minister, Thomas Tabane, after the death of the previous First Lady. So it has gripped the Mountain Kingdom, and certainly more details are going to come out as this trial commences.
So what happened?
That is so sad.
Well, surprising to some because she was on the run for several weeks. She has been granted bail. The state has a certain amount of time to really put more details to the charges. We try to get hold of the First Lady's lawyer without much luck, and she hasn't entered a plea at this stage. Now, one of the key bits of evidence, the police say, is the cell phone of the current Prime Minister. They said that was used in conjunction with the hit on the former First Lady, which happened outside her home just days before that inauguration. 8 other people have been charged in this murder, but those names haven't yet been released. It's striking to see a First Lady in this context of this region facing any kind of criminal charges, let alone murder, Hala. And the key will be whether any more information comes through with those more robust charges we believe will be put through in the next few days. Hala?
Found passports for both the bodyguard and the former British Prime Minister. Metropolitan Police say the officer involved has been removed from duties. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. Stay with CNN. Coverage of the Senate impeachment trial begins next, and in an hour's time, the Senate votes on the articles of impeachment. All of this will be broadcast live on CNN. Stay with us.
Tick, tick. Time for a wrap-up. A Medicare supplement.
RV, and you didn't have one there because you were sitting on your hands.
Somebody like a Senator Collins in a little bit of a box, and I think it's partly because, and you work for him, so you tell us, he's not a natural politician. This is a guy who was a manager, and he did the...
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense to me that for...
Which will also be happy to take that mattress
You can do all the things you love with the ones you love. Because the best thing you can give your family on vacation is you.
My generation, yeah, all about a good time. 100 megabits with no data cap.
Promising future. Please watch for this mailing and remember to send in your pledge. Dealer has received the J.D. Power Award for highest customer service.
Drawbacks to shopping on the popular Wish website.
On the coronavirus, more confirmed cases in the U.S. What does this mean for us? We speak with one of the evacuees from China, now under quarantine in California. And this undercover mom spent 7 days online to catch a predator.
How many grown men try to make contact with the 11-year-old version of you?
52 men.
52?
If you are a parent, you need to stop what you're doing and pay attention right now.
Coming up next.
Good. Great. That was all about.
Season 11 starts now. Today, breaking news, coronavirus in America. Here's what you need to know right now.
I would say yes.
Currently, there are roughly 20,000 coronavirus infections worldwide, with the death toll rising to over 425, even surpassing the SARS epidemic in China. Earlier this week, China saw its deadliest day as 65 deaths were reported in just 24 hours. The largest jump we've seen since this started. Still, the mortality rate from coronavirus is only 2% compared to the whopping 10% with SARS. But that could change. In the United States, there are 11 confirmed cases, and several being investigated as we speak, leaving people worried that coronavirus could turn into a deadly pandemic.
Oh, man.
Panic, fear, and misinformation are being spread virally online even faster than the virus itself. So today, we're going to cut through all that noise to give you the very best and latest information from the front lines of the coronavirus in America. Let's start with breaking news exclusives with someone who is in quarantine right now. Jared Evans is a 27-year-old football player from New York who has played for the Wuhan Berserkers that stay with their football team for the past 2 years. After getting out of Wuhan on this cargo plane, this is actually footage that he shot. Those are all passengers coming over with him, Americans being evacuated. Jared and the others finally arrived at March Air Reserve in Riverside County, California, to be quarantined. Here he is.
My name is Jared Evans. I'm currently at the base here being held and screened. As you can see, the dorms are behind me. People are being screened over there at this time. We are safe and we are sound and happy to be on America's soil. So right now we're going through the process of going through our caseworker and getting screened. And of course, everybody still has their mask on. And it's a hectic time, but I know everybody's excited and ready to get through this.
So we're joining Jared right now. Jared, thank you for being with us. Take us back to when you were in Wuhan and first heard about the new coronavirus. Was it taken seriously at first?
But thank you. I appreciate you having me on the show. It was not taken seriously at all. The news came, very limited to us, and it was just going through our daily days. Everyone going to school, the people are going to work. And honestly, prior to that, it was just, beautiful Wuhan. But when the alert came out, that's when everyone started to really, really get into a panic mode.
So you were actually in the epicenter of the chaos, right in the middle, when they announced they were actually shutting down the cities. Now, just imagine everyone here. Imagine that your city is shut down. No one can come in or go out. What was that like for you?
Yes, it was truly scary. The city turned into complete chaos. People were honestly just panicking, getting masks, arguing, fighting, just to have enough supplies to last, this epidemic.
Chaos. The thin veneer of civilization begins to crack pretty quickly. Dr. Ian Lipton, renowned virus hunter, who is in China right now on the front lines, is sending me updates. And he said the people of China are rising to the daunting challenges before them. And particularly healthcare workers are putting in 16 to 20-hour days. But I get why there's panic everywhere. So, Jared, you're holed up in your home for a week. You finally got some supplies, but you don't know what's going to happen. And then finally you hear that the Americans, at least the ones that we can get to, are going to be taken out by the government. How did it feel to know you were finally going home?
It honestly was a relief. It was a blessing to be chosen out of the 1,000+ Americans that are in Wuhan. As you know, it's still shut down to this day. So it was like a relief off my back, and I'm very grateful for the Department of State and the CDC doing their job.
Yeah, there are 60, 70 million people in that region, it's not just Wuhan, who are now being quarantined off. Jared, if I can ask, are you symptomatic at all? Fever, sore throat, lung problems?
No, not Dr. Oz. I'm not symptomatic, and no one here has actually showed any kind of symptoms either. So we're just ready to go home to our families.
But you still have to wait, I know, because it takes 14 days for this virus to actually show itself. So there could be people who are still going to get symptoms. So as you guys wait, how is it in quarantine? Is everyone being kept apart from each other? Are you afraid that someone else might infect you even though you think you're okay?
So, we're all still taking major precautions. When we're in groups, we're still wearing our masks, but we're forming a little community here. We're also getting checked daily, twice a day through our fevers. So we're doing everything we can to, stay safe.
So, Jared, since you're able to follow what's happening in the media, let's talk a little bit about some of the sentiments you have. I know that you feel strongly about some people arguing that folks of Asian descent shouldn't be allowed to interface with everybody else. This is actually an Asian problem. What do you want to say to those people?
Well, first off, America is a beautiful country, man, and it's a melting pot of all different ethnicity, and we have to understand that if it didn't happen in Asia, it could have happened anywhere else. And for people to be, xenophobic and racist towards, the Asian people is very wrong. I just want to tell everyone that they need to, come together as we are in this community, because there are all Asian Americans here. So.
Jared, God bless you. I agree. I think the threat of this virus should bring us together, not split us apart. Now, since you're a beautiful person on the inside, let me talk a little bit about your outsides. I hear you're getting some strange requests about people wanting to keep you company in quarantine. Is that right?
Yes, Dr. Oz, as me and you are both good-looking people, so yeah, I've been getting some crazy requests in my DMs.
Well, stay safe.
I've got some things, man.
All right. Stay safe. God bless all the Americans in quarantine, and stay healthy.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Coronavirus, just like the flu, is the most dangerous to the elderly and to the young. So imagine what it was like for Randy and Ping Stockstill from Rhode Island, who had their 2 kids, one of which is a 3-month-old baby. 3 months old, baby Maxwell. They were in China while visiting Ping's grandfather, the man who raised her. And they were able to get a flight out of China, but had to leave Ping's grandfather behind in order to get their children to safety. They join us now from their section of the quarantine camp. To both of you, how worried were you that your sons, you have 2 kids, an older son as well, will be exposed to the virus, especially with one of them only being 3 months old?
Hi there. So we were worried. It was a concern with the virus. Our main fear was actually being stuck in China for an extended period. The longer we were there, we were afraid that they would run out of food and other life necessities, like medical services and whatnot. So that's what prompted us to reach out to social media like Twitter, Facebook, Tiger Droppings, people that can help us reach out, family and friends, help raise awareness.
Ping, is your grandfather okay?
Yes, he is okay. He's doing great.
And were you worried about your 3-month-old being so young in an area where we know that there's a lot of virus and it's a pretty lethal virus for young children?
I wasn't actually as worried for a few reasons. Actually, toward the end, I was more inclined to stay. One, neither my older son and my younger son actually had any contact with anyone from Wuhan. And also, I was the only person who ever went to Wuhan, but I was clear after the 14-day incubation period. The only concern I had was, for a very small chance, if someone, of us, if one of us gets sick, then there would be limited medical resources to care for us. That was my only concern.
That's a real concern. I mean, Randy, as an example, when you were going through the checkpoints in China, trying to get out, there was a concern that you actually had a fever, which would have been a big problem for you. What happened?
Well, being from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, I'm not very fond of cold weather. So the day that we set out for the airport, I was pretty bundled up, heavy winter jacket and a wool knit cap. So as we were going through one of the checkpoints, they checked all of our temperature via forehead scan. The first test was indeed failed because of my wool hat, and I was able to pass the second screening with no fever, and we were allowed to proceed toward Wuhan.
Oh my goodness! What testing have you guys had? How about the kids? And do you have any results yet?
Yeah, so the day that we arrived here, January 29th, we all submitted to 3 tests to CDC officials. Those were both a mouth and nose swab and also a blood test. And we're happy to report, at least for our family, that we have passed the swabs. So that means that there was no coronavirus active or there in our throats or nose at the time of testing.
Which is great news. The test that you're hearing about is a special CDC blood test. But even with a negative test, folks have to be quarantined for 14 days because, unfortunately, this virus seems to take that long for symptoms to show.
Wow.
It's the ugly truth of this. But maybe what Romney gave us back was this idea that something matters. Here's the other thing. So far, the only punishment that's been eked out on Romney up until this point by being open but for his vote for witnesses was a disinvitation from a conservative powwow.
Right.
What the Republicans who struggle with Trumpism will see is that he's still standing. That as long as you can do this from a place of principle, you might be able to survive this. And so I think that it makes our coverage of the Republicans, and it's not all of them, right? It's not, I mean, a lot of them are down with everything Trump does and the way he does it. But it's the ones that you name, the ones that struggle with this. He may have opened the door to speaking their minds and sort of living by their principles, come what may.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I was just looking at Twitter, which is not real life. let's emphasize. But seeing that there, this a sort of Trumpist wail and moan and this.
Tim Scott, that's next.
This is saying, look, I may not agree with.
Well, they're all coming back in to the procedures. I hate to hear that about the coronavirus. Good luck to all of us. Good luck and shalom.